the UK's government. Okay, and then we are going to find out how the government of the UK is organized. Now, firstly, I want you to look at the screen and then read the first statement of the slide. Now, let's read together. Britain is a constitutional monarchy, and then it's also a parliamentary democracy too. Okay, so now let's see, what is constitutional monarchy? So it means it is a country governed by a king or queen who accepts the advice of a parliament. And for the second one, there is a country whose government is controlled by a parliament which has been elected by the people. So now on the screen you can see that there are two photos which represent for the constitutional monarchy and the parliamentary democracy. So for the first photo, you can see that this is the queen and the duke, the Duke of Edinburgh, the queen's husband at the state opening of parliament. And what is the state opening parliament? So we are going to learn later. And for the second photo, you can see that is a Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson attends a new conference in London. Okay, so now constitutional monarchy is a quân chủ lập hiến, and parliamentary democracy is a dân chủ đại nghị. So we can see that these two things are totally different. However, they simultaneously occur in the UK. Now let's see. So we are going to find out what is monarchy, democracy, constitutional monarchy. Okay. Now, firstly, let's look at the definition of the Constitution. Okay. Now, so the Constitution sets out how a country to be governed and run, typically defining the checks and balance of government and any individual rights and freedoms. So I want you to pay attention on the phrase checks and balance. So checks and balance means that kiểm soát và cân bằng. Checks and balance. Okay. So we can say that checks and balance is the separation of control among several government organizations, right? Such as like judiciary or legislature and an executive division, right? Tức là checks and balance tức là kiểm soát và cân bằng ha các bạn ha. Cái quy tắc của tam quyền phân lập ha. Okay, là tư pháp, lập pháp và hành pháp, right? Okay, so we can say that the best example of constitution is the United States, right? So I think that most of you know about the article number 2 that defines the rights and power of the president, right? Or the second amendment of the US Constitution. It gives Americans the right to bear arms. Một số các cái điều khoản ở trong hiến pháp của Hoa Kỳ rất là nổi tiếng mọi người ha. Này. Now, so I want you to look at the list of the countries here: the United Kingdom, Israel, Saudi Arabia, New Zealand, and Canada. Okay, so the question is whether or not the UK has a constitution. Okay. So what is true that the UK doesn't have an explicit written constitution with a capital C like the US, for example. Okay. Khi mà mọi người nói đến nước Anh ha, mình sẽ biết mình phải biết là ở nước Anh nó không có một cái hiến pháp được viết thành văn bản giống như nước Mỹ. Okay. So the UK does have, however, they does have an unwritten or uncodified constitution. And this is relatively rare in modern politics, except for the UK, Israel, Saudi Arabia, New Zealand, and Canada, right? And you know that New Zealand and Canada, the last two only in the list, they have uncodified constitutions because they used to British colonies. Okay, so their political systems are based on the UK system. And I think that you still remember about the Magna Carta, right? And then English Parliament, often called the mother of parliaments, uh, has existed for over 7th century. And the founding document is that Magna Carta, or is also called the Great Charter of the Liberties of England. Okay. Một số người thì họ vẫn tin là cái Constitution của nước Anh là Magna Carta, là đại hiến chương mọi người ha. So the Magna Carta so you can say that the Magna Carta was signed in the year 1215, right? And then the spirit of this document has guided the evolution of English law over the centuries later, okay? As well as inspired numerous constitutional documents drawn up by other countries, for example, like the Constitution of the United States in America. Okay? Now, so let's say, so this is the state opening of Parliament. And then this important event in the United Kingdom marks the formal start of the parliamentary year, and the Queen's speech sets out the government agenda for the coming session. So and then it also outline robust policy and legislation. And then is it the only regular occasion when the three constitution part of Parliament, I mean that the monarch or the Queen, the House of Lords and the House of Commons meet together. Okay. And then we are going to watch. No, we are going to watch the video. We are going to watch the video later. Okay. To see what is a state opening of Parliament. Okay. Cái này là cái sự kiện hàng năm mọi người ha, giống như là nó đánh dấu cái sự mở đầu cho một năm mới của người Việt. So let's continue. And then you know that in the state opening of opening state of Parliament, the Queen, there will be a Queen's speech. Okay. So Queen Elizabeth II says what my government intends to do in the coming year. And she appears to have a great power over Parliament. Okay? So usually the event would begin with the Queen's procession from Buckingham Palace to Westminster. And then she will be escorted by the household cavalry. Bé sẽ được sẽ đi từ cái cung điện Buckingham đến cung điện Westminster và được hộ tống bởi một cái đội kỵ binh. Okay. And then the Queen arrives at sovereign entrance and proceeds to the wrapping room. So wrapping room is the room that she wears the imperial state crown. Okay. And then she leads the royal procession through the royal gallery, backed with around 600 guests, to the chamber of the House of Lords. Okay. So we are going to watch a video to see the state opening Parliament. Just wait for me a minute.
Gojek phá đảo xích viên đặt món ăn thân giao món an toàn tiêu.
My lords, pray be seated.
Hello, can you hear what they have said? Các bạn nghe bà vừa mới nói gì không? No, what the queens have said. Rồi có nghe được cái bà nữ hoàng vừa mới nói gì không? So you can see that one seated on the throne, and then the queen instructs the house by saying, "My lords, pray be seated." Okay. My lord, lords, and then in the video you can see that her husband also takes his seat on the throne to her left, right? And then you can see that there are members of the royal family maybe seated elsewhere on the stage too. Okay. As you can see there, right, on your right hand, right? This is the royal family. And then they are on the stage too. And this is the Duke of Edinburgh, her husband. Okay.
My lords, pray be seated. My lords and members of the House of Commons, my government's priority.
She said, "My lords and my members of the House of Commons," right? Các bạn chú ý nghe rõ ha. Tí mình sẽ học về hai cái nhà này ha.
Commons. My government's priority has always been to secure the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union. My government's priority has always been
My government's priority has always been the UK's security. Right?
To secure the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the 31st of October. My government intends to work towards a new...
My government intends to work. So you can see that in her speech, she says what her government intends to do in the coming year, right?
Partnership with the European Union based on free trade and friendly cooperation. My ministers will work to implement new regimes for fisheries, agriculture and trade.
Fishery, agricultural and trade. Okay.
Seizing the opportunities that arise from leaving the European Union. An immigration bill ending free movement.
Okay, so you have a chance to watch the state opening of Parliament every year. Okay, and then you can see that so the Queen's speech is delivered by the Queen from the throne in the House of Lords, as I told you before, right? Although she reads the speech, however, it's written by the government, not her. So it contains an outline of its policy and proposed legislation for the new parliamentary session. Okay. So now I want you to look at the table here, which compare the appearance of the monarch and the reality. Okay. So now let's look at the appearance of the monarch. Choose the prime minister, dismiss ministers and government, dissolve parliament, refuse to agree legislation passed by parliament, dismiss the governments of other countries of which say monarch and embody the law in the course. So in other words, we can say that Queen Elizabeth is above the law, right? However, in reality, she can't choose anyone she likes to be the PM. And the PM decides the government minister, not her. And the PM requests a dissolution of government and the royal assent, I mean that agree to bill passed by parliament is automatic, okay? It means that the Queen has no power at all. So when you look at the table about the role of the monarch, so I want to ask you a question, that is, if you have a chance, so what kind of advice that you will show to the UK government? So would you advise the British to get rid of their monarchy? Okay. So what do you think? Now, would you advise the British to get rid of their monarchy? So because you can see that so the actual role of the monarch is that they choose the personal embodiment of the government of the country, and then they act as final check on government. Actually, all of us know that if the government ever managed to pass a bill through parliament, which was obviously terribly bad or very unpopular, So the monarch could refuse the royal assent and the bill would not become the law. Actually, I don't think that it happened. Okay. And the last reason, the last rule is that they perform the ceremony duties which House of State often have to spend their time on, so that you can say, so that the real government can have more time to get on with their job of running the country, right? So I want to ask you that, would you advise the British to get rid of their monarchy? Thế theo các bạn thì người Anh đó ha, họ có nên bỏ đi cái chế độ quân chủ chuyên chế của họ hay không? Okay. Now, 15 minutes for you to discuss together. Cho cấp 10 phút. 10 phút, not 15. Now, 10 minutes for you to discuss together. I think that you prefer discussing by your own, right? And then after 10 minutes, I will call some groups to share your idea about this question. Đó, theo các bạn ha, thì người Anh họ có nên bỏ đi cái chế độ, bỏ đi cái nữ hoàng rồi vua quý tộc này kia ở nước Anh hay không? Okay, so they keep as like a symbol of culture. Because you know that the royal family, the living expense of the royal family is quite high. And then many British, they don't think that like paying tax for royal family is acceptable. Một số người họ nghĩ rằng là tại sao mình phải nộp thuế ha, để mà mình chi phí cho hoàng gia như vậy ha. Okay. Thì họ không có đồng ý. Right. Thế còn ý kiến các bạn ra sao? Now 10 minutes for you to discuss together. Các bạn, cô nghĩ chắc các bạn sẽ muốn thảo luận theo ý của mình đúng không? Cô không cần phải chia nhóm trên Zoom ha. Right. Các bạn sẽ thảo luận cùng với nhau ha. Sau 10 phút nữa thì cô gọi các bạn đưa ý kiến nhé. Okay.
Dạ cô.
Are you clear? Okay. Hello. Now, I want to invite the group Rita Maria Coulter. Now, can you share your idea about the question that would you advise the British to get rid of their monarchy? Hello, are you there?
Yes, we are here. Well, in our group, we also have a 50-50 opinion in here. 50% opinion in our group agree to keep it because they believe that the royal family is the symbol of Britain. Like every time we mention we talk about England or Britain, is the royal is the symbol that will pop up in our mind first. And they agree to keep, saying that the royal has function to like enhance the power in of citizens in their country. Therefore, they should keep the royal. That's why. And the other opinion, which is including me, vote to delete the royal because we think that the royal family cost too much
and has no room
in
the country, right?
Yes, everything they do just for royal trip. They create a lot of rules and sort of like that, and we don't see any power in their hands. So why the citizen have to pay
for that
the high rate tax for them for their lifestyle? That's unfair, kind of like that. So our group has 50-50 opinion.
Okay, thank you. Now, no name group, please. Hello, no name group. Are you there? Bảo Ly, Bảo Thi, Thu Thủy. Now, our group Flower. Flower, are you there? No? Flower, no. Felicine. You haven't finished yet? Felicine?
Yes, Miss.
Okay.
Yes. We think the registered monarchy should be abolished.
Should be abolished.
Yes, because the monarch does not really have any real political power. The functions are mainly formal and could easily be taken over by other political parties or an elected president.
Okay, so that's all. So there's no reason for the British keeping the monarch, right?
Yes, and in addition, although the Queen is the third wealthiest monarch in Europe, the monarchy still receive public funding.
That's right. Okay, thank you. Now, Ngọc Yến. Hello, Ngọc Yến.
Yes, Miss.
Now, Ngọc Yến group, right? Now, do you have any idea about this problem?
Yes, after discussing, we also come to a conclusion that it should be the monarchy be abolished in England. So first we agree with the two groups that the monarchists had no practical powers in their hands. And
there's no practical role, right? Okay.
Yes. And the questions that the royals spend the tax monies with no check and balance. It's not really good because the cost to operate the monarchies is very expensive. Yes, as we had discussed.
So this is like a kind of wasting money, right? Wasting money of the citizen. Yeah. Okay.
It's not because for the running the office or the heads of state, but they spend the tax for their apartments, for their securities, and for their luxury vacations. So yeah, it's a kind of wasting of money. So our group think that the monarchy should be abolished. However, we know that to abolish a monarchy, it needs a lot of legislation and the act of parliament, as well as the size of the sovereign to end the monarchies. So it's a long journey, and in the first, maybe we just still cannot abolish the monarchy.
Yeah, but I think that maybe the same story of Brexit may happen, right, in the future, right? Because there's no one think that the UK will conduct the Brexit, right? But it still happen. All right, thank you. Now, Thảo Linh group.
Yes, we agreed with the opinion of the previous group, and I believe that it should be abolished because the role of monarch may cause the racism and classism in the society of British, because maybe the British people think they claim that they represent for the rich and the rise for the rich and white people should receive the money and health care and education, high education in this society.
Okay.
Especially with the royal family. Yeah.
I don't know why, but I think that all of the groups in your class agree that the policeman should be applied for the British monarch, right? Whereas all groups in the class 43A, they agree that the British should keep or should maintain the monarch in the UK. So I think that there should be a debate or discussion between the two classes later. Okay, thank you. Now let's continue. Now, so again, I want to restate that Britain is a constitutional monarchy, and then we have learned about that already, right? And now it's time for us to learn more about the parliamentary democracy. Okay, so we know that the UK is a parliamentary democracy. So it means that the government is voted into power by the people to act their interest, right? And so it's totally different with the constitutional monarchy, when a queen, I mean that Elizabeth II has the powers, right? So now let's say, so what is democracy? So I want you to read the definition of democracy below the question. So it means ruled by the people. And I want you to look at the special features of democracy, like allows people a way of choosing and replacing their representative through free and fair election, protects the human rights of all citizens, depends on laws which apply equally to all citizens, and encourages citizens to participate in politics and community life. So it's totally different with constitutional monarchy, right? So for the democracy, we hold an election to choose someone to represent us, right? And that we can see that most candidates who stand for election belong to a political party. It means that a group of people who share similar beliefs, right? Dân chủ tức là khi mình nói đến dân chủ là mình nói tới cái gì các bạn? Vote, đến gì? Election. Nó khác hoàn toàn với lại constitutional monarchy, khác hoàn toàn với quân chủ lập hiến ha. Okay, so let's find out about the foundation of the UK's Parliament. Okay? So we know that the Parliament has evolved throughout its long history to become what it is today. So changing over time to meet the needs of the people. And then we have to mention the two key historical events began this process. As you can see in the first picture, in the 1215, so King John put his seal on Magna Carta and agreed to a list of 63 rules set out by a group of barons, right? And that this ensured for the first time that no one, not even the king, was above the law, right? However, for the second picture, you can see that 50 years later, Simon de Montfort, for the first time, invited representatives of the town and shires to his 1265 Parliament. I mean that, as I mentioned before, 50 years later. Okay. So these events established the foundations for the representative democracy the UK has today. Okay, and now I want to show you a video, and then you can know more about the second event, the event that Simon de Montfort invited representatives of the towns and shires to his 1265 Parliament. Okay. Hôm bữa mình học đến Magna Carta rồi đúng không các bạn? Mình hiểu cái sự ra đời của nó rồi ha. Bây giờ mình sẽ xem một cái đoạn video, mình thử xem ha, cái sự kiện thứ hai mà nó hình thành nên cái Parliament của nước Anh là như thế nào ha.
Earl of Stories from Parliament. Simon de Montfort. England, 1263. It is 48 years since Magna Carta was sealed by King John. Now his son Henry is on the throne, but tensions between the king and the barons continue. Simon de Montfort, Earl of Leicester, is married to the king's sister Eleanor. De Montfort is one of the most powerful men in England, and he is angry. Just 5 years earlier, King Henry made a promise to de Montfort and the barons in Oxford. Here he agreed to place the power of the kingdom under a council of 15 barons. De Montfort has heard that Henry plans to break this promise. Now he waits for news with his wife, Lady Eleanor.
Has the messenger come?
Not yet, but I'm sure it is a false rumour, my lord. King Henry made his promise.
Eleanor, your brother is desperate for money. The council have refused to raise taxes again, but it is rumoured he simply asks the sheriff to...
So as you can see, the council have refused to raise taxes again. Okay, this is rumor. He simply asked the sheriffs. Tức là cái parliament thì hay là council đồng ý là từ chối tăng thuế, nhưng mà nhà vua không có chịu. So there will be a conflict, and then it leads to a conflict later. Okay.
taxes again, but it is rumoured he simply asks the sheriff to find the money another way. He will do whatever it takes. His promises mean nothing.
But the council has
The king does not listen to the council. The king is not listening to anyone. The agreements he made in Oxford mean nothing to him.
But he knows that the people will raise their voices in anger if he breaks his promise.
The king cannot hear the voices of the people, however loud they shout. But one day, I swear, he will hear them. One day, we will find a way to bring not just the barons, but representatives of the people from all across the country. And then the king will hear them speak. And we will make him listen.
My lord, news from London.
Speak.
The promise is already broken.
My brother has gone against his word?
Yes, my lady.
Then, my lord, you know what you have to do.
I must march against the king, your brother.
Yes.
There will be war.
You are a better man than Henry, a stronger man. The people know that. They will follow you. The time is right, Simon. Fight the king and make him listen to the people.
You, take a message to Gilbert the Red. Tell him to call a meeting of the barons. Together we will raise an army, and the king will hear our voice and feel our anger.
London. The Earl of Clare, known as Gilbert the Red, has called a meeting of the barons. All are agreed that the time has come to stand against the king, but not all are sure that Simon de Montfort is the right man to lead a rebellion.
I have no love for de Montfort. They say he is only interested in securing his own wealth and power.
If de Montfort leads our army and defeats the king, then who knows how much power he will seize for himself.
He's already married to the king's sister. Perhaps he believes that one day he could become king himself.
Gilbert the Red, what do you say?
Simon de Montfort must be our leader. Our soldiers admire him, and besides, the people love him.
The people? Who cares about the people?
De Montfort cares. He stands up for England, and the people know it. That is why he will, that is why he must lead us.
Spring, 1264. De Montfort's army is on the move. On May the 14th, they face the king's army at Lewes. The Bishop of Chichester visits the king, trying to prevent a terrible battle.
Your Majesty, it is not too late. Montfort is prepared to talk.
Our army outnumbers his 2 to 1. He will not beat us. Not today.
Montfort is a strong leader.
Montfort is injured. I've been told that he cannot even ride a horse. How will he lead his men into battle with a broken leg?
He will find a way to lead them, Your Majesty, and they will follow him.
And my men will follow me. Steward, more wine.
So, what shall I tell Montfort?
Tell him to prepare to die.
The Battle of Lewes drags on, but Simon de Montfort leads his troops well. He has given them a cause to fight for.
We fight today so that the voice of England can be heard. And when we win this day, our voices will ring out across the years so that Henry and every king and queen who follows him will hear us.
De Montfort's men fight ferociously, and destroy the king's army. Finally, the king is captured, and those of his men who are still alive and have not been seized flee the battlefield. And so, my lord, you have the king in your power. What happens now?
A parliament, my lady. That is what happens. We will make a new parliament, and this time it will not be filled with barons and lords. This parliament will have representatives from every corner of England. There will be knights from every county, and citizens from towns and cities, and these men will be chosen by the people. And when our new parliament speaks, this time the king will listen.
December the 14th, 1264. The call goes out. Choose 2 representatives and send them to London. Simon de Montfort's parliament doesn't last long, and it is by no means perfect. But on the 20th of January, 1265, when the representatives sit down together for the first time, the country takes one more step on the long road to parliamentary democracy.
Okay, and then if you want to know more about the Magna Carta, you can access the channel UK Parliament to find more videos about the history of the UK's Parliament. Okay? Now, so that is the foundation of the UK's Parliament, and let's talk about the UK's Parliament today. So, as you can see on the screen, so Parliament is made up of 3 parts: the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and the monarch. I mean that the Queen. Okay? And all the activities of Parliament in Britain are more or less the same as those of the Parliament in any Western democracy. It makes new laws, gives authority for the government to raise and spend money, keeps a close eye on government activities and discusses activities. Okay, and then we are going to find out how the House of Commons and the House of Lords work later. Okay, so this is the picture of the Houses of Parliament. So the British Parliament works in a large building, and it's called the Palace of Westminster, and we usually know it as the Houses of Parliament, as I showed you on the slide. Okay, and then when you look at the note of the label in the folder, so you can see that the Houses of Parliament contains offices, committee rooms, restaurants, bars, libraries, and even some places for residents too. Okay, and then it also contains 2 lecture rooms. One of these is where the House of Lords meets, and the other is where the House of Commons. Okay. So this is the place of the House of Lords, and the people who work in the House of Lords are called the peers, and the peers meet in the southern part of the Palace of Westminster. Okay, and the peers will check that new laws are fair or not. Now let's learn about the members of the House of Lords. And the House of Lords has about 800 members, and most of them are called life bearers because they are given membership for their lifetime. Okay. And life bearers are appointed by the monarch on the advice of the Prime Minister to serve for their life. However, the title is not transferable. Okay. And the role of the members of the House of Lords is that as questions, debate important issues, and examine and suggest changes to plans for the new laws. Because many members have professional knowledge in different areas like education, health, and then they can use this. They can use their experience to check that the detail in plans for the new laws make sense or not, whether it's fair will work for different groups of people or not. Okay. Và những cái người mà ở trong cái the House of Lords là đến từ nhiều cái lĩnh vực khác nhau, họ sẽ check thử xem là những cái luật đó nó có phù hợp với từng cái nhóm người nhất định hay không. So this is the structure of the House of Lords. Okay. The House of Lords. Now let's move to the House of Commons. So the members meet in the northern. So the people who work in the House of Commons are called the MP. It means that the members of Parliament. Trước mình thuyết trình mình có cái chữ viết tắt là MP ha, tức là members of Parliament. Mặc dù là những người làm ở the House of Lords và làm ở House of Commons luôn, nhưng mà người làm việc ở House of Lords thì được gọi là peers hay là life peers. Nhưng mà những người làm việc ở House of Commons thì được gọi là Parliament, members of Parliament. Đó là sự khác nhau mọi người ha. So the members of the House of Commons meet in the northern part of the Palace of Westminster. Okay. So this is the House of Commons. So the House of Commons is where all the members of Parliament spend a lot of their time working and debating. And then there are totally 615 members of Parliament, and each one has the important job of representing people from their local area in Parliament. Okay. Because MPs are voted by the people in their constituency in general election. So this is the difference between the peers of the House of Lords and the members of the House of Commons. So I want to raise a question that what is the difference between Parliament and the government? Okay. Now, can you tell me what is the difference between the Parliament and the government? Okay. Theo các bạn, sự khác nhau của Parliament và government sẽ là gì? So Parliament represents the people and the government runs the country. Okay. Cô sẽ cho các bạn xem một cái video để xem Parliament và government sẽ khác nhau cái gì. However, before that, I want to show you the two videos to know more about the House of Lords and the House of Commons. Trước khi mình phân biệt the Parliament với lại government ha, Mình sẽ xem trước cái video để tìm hiểu xem The House of Commons với The House với The House of Lords thì nó khác nhau cái gì. Cô thấy cái kênh UK Parliament này nó khá là hay á. Mọi người muốn tìm hiểu thêm mình có thể xem ở trên đó ha.
Too busy bickering on TV to run the country? There's got to be more to the House of Commons than that, right? Before the House of Commons or the House of Lords, there was just the king and his barons. The king could call on them whenever he wanted, but he didn't count on them becoming powerful. And in 1215, they made King John seal Magna Carta, which forced him to obey the law, and set up an advisory council of 25 men. 50 years later, Simon de Montfort rebelled against Henry III and for the first time invited representatives of the towns together with the Knights of the Shires to his 1265 Parliament. These citizens met separately from the nobility and evolved to form the House of Commons in 1332. So, now there are two houses, the House of Commons and the House of Lords. As the rights of the people increased, the king and nobility became less powerful, and the balance of power eventually swung to the Commons. In 1512, a huge fire consumed Westminster Palace. Henry VIII moved out, and once rebuilt, it became Parliament's home. Parliament still works from Westminster today and has three parts: the House of Commons, the House of Lords and the monarchy. Members of the House of Commons are elected by you and me. Every 5 years we elect representatives to run the country on our behalf, which means we run the country. Kinda. It's easy to run as a candidate. You just have to be 18, not in prison and not a lord. Oh, and also, you can't be the monarch. Ever since Charles I burst in on the chamber uninvited, no king or queen has been allowed in. So, what does the House actually do all day? It debates important issues, makes and reviews our laws, represents the public, and holds the government to account. Inside the House of Commons there are two sides. On one side the government who run the country, and on the other side the opposition who keep an eye on what the government are doing. The chamber only has 437 seats for over 600 members, so MPs have to pack in for big debates. The Commons Speaker sits at the head of the room to maintain order. The Prime Minister leads the government and appoints ministers to form a cabinet. You'll see them on the front bench. It's the government that introduces most of the ideas for new laws and changes to old ones. The opposition questions and challenges the government. All MPs split their time between the House of Commons and their constituency. Often MPs have to figure out what's best for their party or what's best for the local people they represent, even the ones who didn't vote for them. There are lots of ways the government is held to account. Every week, for half an hour, the Prime Minister comes to the House of Commons to answer questions from MPs. It's dramatic, it's heated, and it's this that gets the most viewers tuning in. But it's not just the PM in the hot seat. MPs get to question ministers from all government departments. And then there are select committees where MPs spend a lot of time reviewing the policies and spending of government. This is called scrutiny. They speak to experts and the public to understand how laws affect our everyday lives. This work helps the government shape their policies. Also, whenever the government wants to raise taxes, the House of Commons has to agree. They review any proposed bill before they vote. So it's not just a lot of rowdy bickering. They do more than what's shown on TV. Debating important issues, making laws, holding the government to account, and allowing MPs to represent the public. That's you. So, what do you think of the House of Commons now?
Who's in charge of Britain? What's the Prime Minister?
Hey, the House of Lords isn't some giant house party for rich old men. But who are the Lords and why do we have them? The Lords started off as a kind of advisory council to the King, who was much more powerful back then. They met up at Westminster every now and then to discuss matters of state. But in 1215, King John, of Robin Hood fame, was forced to sign the Magna Carta, sharing power with the nobility. Trade became more and more important, leading to the rise of a new merchant class. By the 14th century, Edward III had two groups of advisors divided into chambers: the Lords and the Commons, made up of lesser knights and merchants. This is why we have two houses in Parliament. As time passed, the Commons became increasingly dominant and the king became less powerful. In 1649, King Charles was even executed by the Commons. The balance of power between the houses swung firmly towards the Commons. From that day on, inheriting seats made the people feel like the Lords were only for the privileged. As society moved on and cultures changed, the questions arose. How have these people earned their place? How can they represent the public? In 1958, the Life Peerages Act introduced women into the House and radically changed who's in the Lords. From then on, any man or woman could come into the House based on what they had achieved in their career. The Lords Act of 1999 reduced the number of hereditary peers in the House and stopped Lords passing their seat to their own family. A panel was made to help the Prime Minister decide who is brought into the House, so that now the House is made up of people from all walks of life: political peers, crossbench peers, as well as hereditary peers and bishops. They all use their experience from inside and outside of Parliament to check and challenge government. So what does the House of Lords do on a daily basis? The House has three main functions: to question and challenge the work of the government, to work with the Commons to shape laws, and to investigate issues through committees and debates to help improve the way the country is governed. The House of Lords is currently the second busiest legislative chamber in the world, right after the Commons. Its chamber is laid out in the same way as the Commons: the government party on the one side, the opposition on the other. Peers who don't belong to any political party are known as crossbenchers, as they sit on the cross benches opposite the woolsack. The woolsack is the Lord Speaker's seat. Back when wool used to be our main trade, this seat was supposed to remind the Lords to protect our trade. It was, and still is, stuffed with the wool from hundreds of sheep from around the Commonwealth. Strange seats aside, the Lords is different to the Commons because there's no majority for any political party. The party in power does not necessarily have the most seats. As the Lords are not elected, they're less caught up in party politics and can concentrate on their three main functions. So most people have some preconceived idea of what the Lords are, but the reality is quite different. What do you think?
Okay, and the next video will show you what is the difference between the government and the parliament. Okay.
Right, I've just learned pretty much everything there is to know about Parliament, and I reckon I can teach it to you in about 5 minutes.
5 minutes? I've spent my whole life studying this.
Yeah, well, you're obviously not very good at it then. OK, I'll keep this short and sweet, unless anyone keeps interrupting, all right? Here we go. This is the Prime Minister and his cabinet.
Hang on a minute, that's a bunch of monkeys.
Oh, a bit of respect, please, Brian. Oh, right, yeah, then. Anyway, this is the government. It has about 100 ministers who are each responsible for different areas of our lives, like transport, education, even food and sport. The government makes decisions on our behalf, but it can't do anything it likes. There's Parliament. Parliament is bigger, and the government's part of it.
Parliament is the highest authority in the UK. It's our legislative body, which means that it makes and revises most of the laws in the UK.
Oh, nice one. Hey, I'm reading this book. It's called Everyone Loves a Know-It-All.
Are you?
No, because no one wrote it. As well as making and changing laws, Parliament has to keep an eye on and influence the government. This is called scrutiny, which sounds quite painful.
So, Parliament and government are two very different things. Parliament is the highest authority in Britain and keeps a check on...
There's a 5-minute time limit here. if you don't mind. Parliament is made up of three things: the monarch, the House of Lords and the House of Commons. The House of Commons contains all the 646 members of Parliament, or MPs. These are the people we vote for at general elections. Each MP represents a different part of the country. An MP's political area is called a constituency. So, what does Parliament actually do? Well, stuff is a short answer. Loads of stuff is a bit longer. Longer again, both the House of Commons and the House of Lords spend around half the time making and passing new laws. MPs can also bring up subjects for debate, so everyone gets their opinions heard. As there's lots of opinions, sometimes everyone shouts at the same time. Order! And Parliament scrutinises what the government is doing, especially how it raises and spends money.
And how does the government do that?
Well, we pay for everything in the country through taxes. Income tax on what we earn, VAT on what we buy, council tax for local services. Pretty much all the government's money comes from us. The government spends its money on things like schools, hospitals, emergency services, the legal system and the armed forces.
So, how does Parliament scrutinise the government and make sure our taxes are spent wisely?
It does a few things. Its members ask the government awkward questions, and they form groups of people called committees, which scrutinise the work of individual government departments. The House of Lords scrutinises the government too. They also help to introduce new laws and have their own committees investigating big issues like Europe, science and the economy. This concludes my high-speed, blah-blah free guide to Parliament and government. Any questions?
I'm impressed. It was a triumph of brevity and concision, a waffle-free whistle-stop summary of the workings of our parliamentary system, a pithy, high-octane précis of constitutional hierarchy. It was a...
So this is the picture for the government of the UK. Okay, so on your left side, you can see that is the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Okay, and then on your right hand, you can see that is his cabinet. Okay, and so this is the Prime Minister of the UK. Okay? And actually, we know that, as I told you before, like the Queen is above the law, right? However, the position of the Prime Minister is in direct contrast to the Queen, because the Queen is like we can see that she appears to have a great deal of power. However, in reality, she has very little. In contrast, the Prime Minister appears not to have much power, but in reality, he has a very great deal indeed. Okay, and for the cabinet, so you can see that no government wants an important member of its party to stop criticizing it. So because this would lead to divisions in the party, so they made the cabinet. Okay, and the cabinet meets once a week and take decisions about new policies and the implementation of existing policy and the running of the various government departments. Okay. So the cabinet can help run the complicated machinery of the modern government. Vậy mọi người thấy ha, government đứng đầu sẽ là Prime Minister và hỗ trợ cho ông này sẽ là cabinet. And then as you can see in the picture, this is the Boris Johnson cabinet. So there are some question. Cô số câu hỏi thì có các bạn biết không? Now, who was the British Prime Minister when the Second World War broke out? Các bạn nào biết không? No one? Hello? Hello? Cái này cũng không sao được. Now, who was the British Prime Minister when the Second World War broke out?
I think it's Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill. No. Okay. I don't know I have to check the information on the internet.
Okay.
World War ended. Second World War ended. Okay, we are going to choose Winston Churchill one more time, okay, to see. Okay, so when the war ended, we'll count. Do you know this? What British Prime Minister was elected in 1945 and established the National Health Service? Any idea? Let's see. Say, I don't know. What two prime ministers were elected in 1950s? Có tới 2 người nữa. Let's see. Winston Churchill, Anthony Eden. Do you know the answer for this question? No. It's James. And the last one, I want to ask you the last question. Not this one. Now, who is the current British Prime Minister? Ai các bạn? Nãy giờ cô nói rồi đó. Cô sâu quá trời. Hello, who's that? Các bạn biết không?
Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson. Okay. Right, bây giờ, so it's the end of the lesson about the government of the UK. Okay, now so it's time for you to present about the university that you are interested in. Okay. Bây giờ đến lượt các bạn ha. Mình sẽ thuyết trình về cái trường đại học mà các bạn thích. Cô đã post lên cái chấm điểm ha, cách tính điểm của bài thuyết trình Hello Britain rồi á ha. Các bạn có thể xem ha. You can take a look as a reference for your presentation later. Okay. Right now. Homify will be the first presenter, right? And then you are going to talk about the University of Greenwich. Hello, are you ready?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Các bạn có muốn tắt đọc break không?
Dạ, break xíu đi cô.
Break xíu đi. 10 phút đi ha. 3 giờ 5 mình quay lại nhé.
Ok cô.